Land of the free, and home of the brave. May God bless these United States of America. When I was a kid, guns were normal for my family. Nearly every member of my family served in the military. My father was a military kid and eventually served himself in intelligence. America was at the core of our identity. Our values came with us when we moved to the city. When I was young, we handled firearms. One of the few things I had learned was proper firearm safety and handling both from my father and my grandfather who served in Vietnam. I learned responsibility with a firearm, and I learned how dangerous they could be. We even went out one day practicing with his service rifle and a couple other souvenir firearms he picked up from Vietnam, a shotgun and a revolver. Now as I'm an adult, most of my childhood memories are distant and faded. But the lessons and meaning remain crystal clear. When it comes to the Second Amendment, I appreciate the rights I inherently have, the rights I'm promised simply by being an American. At least I should. But that very right is being dismantled, piece by piece, right in front of us. How so? Tyrannical lawmakers pass bans on tiny, insignificant parts of a firearm, and somehow, with the stroke of a pen, they turn law-abiding citizens into felons. Remember that shotgun I told you about? The one my grandfather brought home from Vietnam? It was called a trench gun. It was legal until it suddenly wasn't. Why? Because someone decided it was too dangerous due to its short barrel. And just like that, a piece of American history, a family heirloom, became a felony. I don't even have it anymore. And honestly, maybe that's a good thing. Because if I did, I'd be labeled a criminal today, not for committing a crime, but for owning something my Constitution said I could. And let's be honest, any firearm should be protected. Why? Because the Founding Fathers didn't write the Second Amendment with limits. They owned dangerous weapons too. Cannons, private warships, early machine guns, they knew what they were doing. And yet now, America's following behind Canada, where even a single-shot .22 rifle is one of the last things you're legally allowed to own. And we haven't even touched the punishment for daring to use one in defense of yourself, your home, or your family. Let me give you a hypothetical, but one grounded in history. When Nazi officers came for Anne Frank, they weren't foaming at the mouth with hate. No, most of them were just doing their job. And that's exactly the excuse used by many in authority today who enforce unconstitutional laws. You've got officers out there who swear to uphold the Constitution, but behind closed doors, they complain it gets in their way. They say things like, "We'd be safer if people didn't have guns." Safer for who? You? Or safer for a government that's afraid of a people who can defend themselves? Let's be clear, the Constitution isn't optional. It's not a privilege, it's a boundary. It's not there to make your job easy, it's there to make sure your job doesn't become tyranny. And when police or officials enforce gun bans, confiscations, or unconstitutional edicts, they are no longer public servants. They are functionaries of oppression no matter how polite their uniform may be. Don't get me started on states that demand you run away from danger and only fight back when you're on the brink of death. That isn't courage, that's mandated submission. Passivity is only good in moderation, but forced helplessness is the seed of tyranny. The Second Amendment exists to prevent that. So when an officer finds the Constitution annoying or inconvenient, maybe it's time they remember why it was written in the first place. Not to protect their job, but to protect our liberty. The Second Amendment isn't optional, it's the backbone of every right we have. And without it, the rest fall like dominoes. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is the Second Amendment, word for word. Now let's break it down and shine a light on how far we've drifted. A well-regulated militia didn't mean licensed by the government or buried in red tape. It meant trained, armed, and ready citizens, neighbors, families, communities, capable of defending not just their lives but their liberty. Today, to even organize as a militia, you're expected to file paperwork, get approval, and operate under rules written by the very institutions you're supposed to keep in check. That's not regulation. That's obstruction. They say it's for safety, but we know better. You don't want an armed, trained populace because you know they could say no when tyranny says obey. Militia is not rebellion, it's prevention. It's not anarchy, it's accountability. But here's the problem: when push comes to shove, the very people who swore to protect us, our police, our National Guard, our military, may be ordered to stand between tyrants and patriots. And too often, they follow that order. They say, I have a family, I need my pension, and I get it, family is everything. But here's the truth no one wants to say. If you choose comfort over the Constitution, you're not protecting your family, you're surrendering their future. You're not keeping the peace, you're enabling oppression. That's how nations fall. Not from bombs or invasions, but from obedience to unjust authority. The Second Amendment doesn't just give us the right to bear arms. It gives us the duty to defend our freedom when no one else will. I'd advocate for a national citizen militia not loyal to parties or politicians, but to the Constitution itself. Because when Americans pledge blind loyalty to red or blue, we lose sight of what really matters: our liberty. What this country needs isn't more political tribes, it's more patriots. Patriots who understand that American prosperity doesn't come from politicians, it comes from the people standing firm, even when tyranny tightens its grip. And how do we fight back? By restoring the Second Amendment to its full intent. That means removing unconstitutional bans, repealing arbitrary restrictions, and recognizing the right to bear arms as a foundation of liberty, not a negotiable privilege. So here's what I would change about the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, composed of trained, armed, and self-governing citizens of the United States, being necessary to the defense of liberty and the security of a free state, shall not be infringed, whether the threat be foreign invasion or domestic tyranny. When you tie this in with my Americans Against Tyranny Act, you start to realize how crucial the practice what you preach concept becomes. Not just for speech or protest, but for the right to defend your freedom. What disturbs me most? I've had conversations with fellow Americans who mocked the idea of a militia, like it's some outdated joke from a history textbook. You tell someone, I wouldn't join the military, I'd rather defend my country through a constitutional militia. And they laugh like it's treason. But let's ask the real question. What happens if a militia, lawfully formed and constitutionally protected, is just as trained, just as armed, as the government forces they're meant to check? Suddenly the government gets scared. Not of chaos, but of accountability. That's when things get dangerous. Tyrants don't want a militia, they want submission. If troops are ordered into our cities, would they protect the people or the power? And what if the only resistance is a group of Americans with the same constitutional training, but labeled domestic threats for daring to say no? The problem is deeper than just law. It's culture. When people hear militia, they picture either Civil War reenactments or extremists in the desert. They don't picture what the Founding Fathers intended. Ordinary citizens, trained, organized, and ready to defend the Constitution when government no longer does. We've gone so long without real militias, most people don't even remember they're supposed to exist. And if one ever did rise again, legitimately, peacefully, and constitutionally, how long before the government shuts it down for national security? To make it clearer, here's a metaphor. In the Command and Conquer game Tiberian Sun, there's a scene where Anton Slavik, a loyal general to Kane and branded a traitor to Nod, exposes a false leader who was bought out by the enemy to weaken the movement from within. It's fiction, sure, but it mirrors a real danger. The use of phony leaders and manipulated narratives to discredit legitimate resistance. Tyranny doesn't always kill liberty in one blow. Sometimes it strangles it with a smiling face and a fake flag. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Let's be real. What was the intent the Founding Fathers had with this amendment? So that in the future we can defend ourselves from foreign invasion and tyranny? Or was it for a corrupt, tyrannical government dictating we the people cannot defend for ourselves because they promise safety and security? I get it, because some weapons are that dangerous. But that ignores the inherent responsibility of personal accountability regarding safe handling of a dangerous weapon. The argument we always come back to is how these dangerous weapons can cause mass death and extreme collateral damage, such as how much damage a mass shooter can do if they have an M60 and ammo to use it, or bank robbers pulling out an RPG to destroy a SWAT truck. Truth is, what we consider illegal firearms are still to this day possessed and used by criminal elements in America, despite the law forbidding the possession and ownership of them. The argument against guns shouldn't be about how dangerous they are, or what they can do. Neither should the arguments be about what if someone who we can argue shouldn't have one for legitimate safety reasons. But the argument should be about how to properly teach and prepare people, not just how to use it, but to be safe with it. I can already imagine the arguments. But then criminals will be able to get these weapons, not realizing criminals already do get these weapons. Imagine this: all firearms are suddenly banned, turning anyone who possesses them into a felon unless they turn it in voluntarily. Now imagine if all law-abiding citizens disarm themselves. Do you think the criminals are going to go in and disarm themselves too? It's foolish to think so. A firearm is like a double-edged sword. It can be a tool for good and a tool for genuine evil. The idea of getting rid of said tool doesn't change the fact criminal elements in our country will one way or another obtain them. So my take? If the Founding Fathers didn't just have muskets and flintlocks, which were essentially breech loaders, as well as early machine guns, cannons, and warships, the modern equivalent would be assault rifles, rocket launchers, and the very ships our Navy uses. If the Founding Fathers had genuine weapons of mass destruction of their time and it was legal, then it seems obvious to me we too in the modern era should have the ability to obtain modern versions. Not specifically in cases for self-defense, but the defense of our home from foreign invaders and internal tyranny. Imagine how scary America would look to our enemies if every citizen was armed and trained like our militaries. We the people would be the second army America has, following the Marines, Army, Navy, and Air Forces. And as citizens, we too would be our own National Guard and our own militias. What country wouldn't want to feel safe and powerful against their enemies? Oh, right. A country who wants to disarm you because they're corrupt and tyrannical. What happens if an American leader, backed by foreign governments and our own, demands the subjugation and unconditional submission and servitude of the American people? That's why the Second Amendment exists. To give we the people teeth to bite back when tyranny says obey. Plus, there is evidence to suggest places that are more pro-gun also have less crime compared to gun-free places. It's no surprise gun-free zones have not only more crimes committed but also have gun crimes committed there as well. And when we look at other countries who have placed bans on firearms, many of their criminal elements have guns too. Just look at the Italian mafia, or the Japanese mobs. Places where guns are illegal, but of course criminals have them anyways. So what am I trying to say exactly? Regardless of how dangerous a weapon can be, we the people by law should be able to legally attain, perhaps even own. That even includes nuclear weapons in some sort of degree. I'm not saying every American should keep a nuke in their garage. I'm asking, why should only governments be trusted with that kind of destructive power? What does it say about trust and who we fear? I can already hear the criticism and guarantee people will say this: those are too dangerous. Or are you suggesting there should be a limit to a protected American right? If the state can be trusted with weapons of mass destruction, but its people cannot even be trusted with a rifle, the issue isn't the weapon, it's the trust. Here's another question. What gives you the right to impose a limit on something that was never intended to have limits? Safety reasons? Because to me that sounds like a cultural problem, not a gun problem. Instead of spending tax dollars on enforcing illegal gun bans, spend tax dollars fixing the American culture and getting help to those who need it, especially those who may not be properly fit to possess a firearm, to become healthy. However, that very same safety argument is vague and broad, because what does it really mean to be fit to even possess a firearm? Mentally sane or emotionally stable? Who gets to judge that? The government? We have to change how we think. Guns aren't the problem. It's our culture and it's our priorities. Rather than spending billions criminalizing honest gun owners, why not rebuild a culture that teaches responsibility before fear, one that gives people tools to live, not reasons to snap? We shipped our manufacturing to foreign countries so a handful of people could pocket extra cash. These very factories too made our cars, our sports equipment, our hobbies. Innovation was sold to a foreign country. Imagine a world where the Sunday night seasonal football games suddenly went out of date. That's diabolically dystopian. Kids no longer play in the playgrounds with other kids because we are all stuck at home, buried in tablets and phones, at work or school, stressing over finances, when our overall health would improve if our country allowed its people to take time for not only themselves but their families without the need to worry if they will have a home or food for tomorrow. Veterans get screwed by the VA because they don't actually care, despite our veterans suffering from injuries directly related to their work in the military. Our vets wind up homeless because there is no path to reintegrate them into civilian life. Very few make it on their own because civilian life is a whole new kind of war to someone who has only seen combat for the past 20 years. Even jobs discriminate against veterans because they're seen as a liability. Again, zero path of reintegration. Within the last 100 or so years, we've systematically dismantled and utterly destroyed the nuclear family structure. A structure which prided us with countless siblings and extended families, and now the idea of two people with the sole intent to get together to reproduce is seen as controversial. We forget family is what built America, not just our rights and our desire to escape the crown during our colonial days. We spend trillions in anything but American infrastructure. We dump billions annually into failing machines such as the military-industrial complex, the liberal economic order, and others alike. We jack up prices and systematically price out all but the top percentile of the wealthiest of wealthy individuals in our country. We lapse bills and foot it to the people. We take out loans and we make the American people pay for it. We enable corruption in our economy to satiate a lavish life, and be damned if you're not a part of the wealthiest of families in the world. Our government would rather waste money on nonsense, like the fraud, waste, and abuse DOGE discovered when Elon Musk was in charge of finding it earlier this year in 2025. Instead of doing the American people justice, they hoard the Epstein files. America at its core isn't the America I grew up to believe. America, I argue, is a nearly 300-year-old dictatorship, pretending to be a democratic republic. Our elected leaders act like their grandmothers are pinching their ears like they did something bad when foreign officials, lobbying groups, and special interests start talking. History has shown again and again that those who challenge the system, from MLK to JFK, often end up silenced. Whether by lone actors or coordinated interests, the message is the same: power protects itself. All of this because our government doesn't serve the people. The people serve the government. That's why tyrant cops get away with breaking the rules. That's why legislators get a bonus and a pat on the back for betraying the people and the Constitution, but only a slap on the wrist when caught. Nazi Germany was a genocidal curse. Stalinist Russia was a country of perpetual insecurity and betrayal. Mao's China was an embodiment of human betrayal. America is the country of hypocrisy. America is the country where bullies are born and praised. America is where you go to make someone disappear. America is the hidden corruption of the world. The America we were promised has collapsed, but it doesn't mean it can't be rebuilt. Not by corrupt leaders, but by citizens willing to reclaim what was stolen: liberty, accountability, and truth. In the end, it's not like we're trying to fix the problem either. As I said before, the argument shouldn't be about how dangerous guns are, or how we can limit a limitless right, but figure out a way to work around our rights to help better our own lives. Should Americans be able to possess weapons the government hoards for itself, like tanks, rocket launchers, and, yes, nuclear technology? I say yes. With one condition: that we wield such tools with the same accountability we demand from our leaders. Because when only tyrants have WMDs, tyranny becomes unkillable. Because if only the government is allowed to use nukes, military-grade equipment, then how can patriots resist tyranny when all the tyrant has to do is press a button? We know small countries which have no nukes get consumed by larger superpowers like the US, China, and Russia. It's a form of unspoken protection. Would it be dangerous for 500 million people to legally attain a nuke? Obviously. But I argue nuclear technology should only exist for economic ingenuity, not military. However, we're still apes with warheads, pounding drums of power we don't understand. If that doesn't scare us enough to build peace instead of bombs, what will? What's next? Orbital space lasers that harness the power of the sun to literally evaporate entire cities from orbit? How far does our desire for the next WMD go when we fail to stop to consider if we've gone too far? I get the argument too, because even our enemies don't share the same idea. I don't blame them, because in the end we are all still animals. In a way, we are merely a speck in a cosmic force. I suppose from the ground whence we came, to the ground we return. From ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Perhaps this is our purpose. All life dies, as do all worlds too, and if there is guaranteed perpetual existence after that, what does it matter how the end comes? From end to end on this world, most are blinded.